Have you ever felt that craving for a deeper understanding? A shortcut to being truly well-informed, but without drowning in just this endless sea of information?
Yeah, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Exactly. And that's really why we're here today. We're going to dive deep into what it truly means to be a Muslim, according to, well, a really renowned scholar.
Right. Our sources for this deep dive, they're excerpts from Khutbaat, that means sermons, specifically chapter 2, which is titled Islam. And the author is the celebrated Islamic scholar and researcher, Maulana Syed Abul Maududi.
Maududi, yeah.
And our mission here is basically to pull out the core essence of Islam as he presents it. We'll explore, the fundamental criteria for faith, those often quite subtle pitfalls of misguidance, and the profound difference between just saying you have faith, legally speaking, and true heartfelt submission.
What's really striking about Maududi, and the sources really hammer this home, is his incredible impact. He had this rare ability to present Islam in a way that's described as heartfelt, rational, and comprehensive. All three.
That's quite a combination.
It really is. His writings are said to inspire, absolute certainty, strength, and faith, and they've genuinely moved countless people, even, former advocates of atheism and secularism, to actually embrace Islam. And Khutbaat itself holds this unique kind of leading position among his works because of that transformative influence.
It provides a really powerful foundation for our discussion today. So let's start where Maududi does, with a really basic question. What are the absolute minimum conditions for someone to be considered a Muslim? Like, what's the least one must embody to truly be worthy of that name?
That's the crucial starting point, isn't it? And to answer it, the sources clarify the core difference between kufr, that's disbelief, and Islam, which means submission. So kufr is simply when a person denies obedience to God, pretty straightforward. And Islam is when a person submits solely to God and rejects any system, any law, any command that goes against God's guidance.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive for some listeners. Maududi stresses this isn't just about what happens in, say, a legal court.
Right.
The Quran, for instance, has this powerful verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah. It says, "And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, such are the disbelievers."
Wow, okay.
The crucial insight Maududi draws from this is that it broadens the scope hugely. It means in every decision in life, like, should I do this or not? How should I do it? If you choose a path other than God's book and the Sunnah, the way of his messenger, even partially.
Even partially?
Yes, even partially. You are involved in disbelief to that extent. It's not presented as just an on-off switch. You can be sort of partially disbelieving in certain choices, chipping away at your submission.
That's a really sharp distinction. So it's not just about one big declaration, it's about the constant daily choices we make. Because ultimately, Islam means total servitude to God alone. It's about being a servant only of God, not of yourself, not your ancestors, your tribe, religious leaders, landlords, magistrates, anyone else besides God.
Yeah.
And the Quran makes this incredibly clear. It invites people to this common principle, that we will worship none but Allah, that we will not associate anything with him, and that we will not take one another as lords besides Allah.
So true religion, then, is about far more than just, offering 5 daily prayers or observing certain rituals. It means obeying God at all times, holding back from what he's forbidden, and actually acting on what he's commanded.
Mm-hmm.
The question in every single situation should always be, what is God's ruling? Not, what do I want? What does my intellect suggest? What did my great-grandparents do? What does the community think? None of that.
And if you abandon God's command for anyone else's opinion, you've elevated that person or that idea to a status that belongs only to God. It's a pretty profound thought, right? You've essentially made them a partner with God.
A partner, yeah.
As the Quran firmly states, judgment belongs to none but Allah. Maududi uses this incredibly stark analogy saying humans shouldn't be worse than animals and stones.
Wow.
Emphasizing how unnatural it is, in his view, for us to defy God when even the rest of creation submits to his laws.
That really brings us to a crucial point in Maududi's analysis. Understanding the very roots of disbelief, or maybe the paths to misguidance. He identifies 3 main routes, ways that misguidance enters a person's life. He likens them to false gods or idols that challenge God's authority.
Right.
And for true servitude, he says, these idols must be smashed.
Okay, so 3 false gods to smash. What's the first one?
The first path is what he calls the worship of the self, the nafs. This is all about following your own desires, constantly seeking money, status, pleasure, comfort, even when God explicitly forbids it.
Okay.
The Quran challenges this directly, asking something like, who is more astray than the one who follows his own desire without guidance from Allah? In this scenario, that person's real God isn't Allah, it's their own desire, their nafs.
So your own desires become your God.
Pretty much. The Quran even questions if such a person truly hears or understands. It states they are like cattle, rather. They are even more astray.
More astray than cattle. Why?
Because, Maududi explains, animals don't intentionally break God's limits in the way humans can when they're just enslaved by their own wants and whims.
That's a powerful image. Okay, what's the second route to misguidance?
The second is the blind following of forefathers. This happens when ancestral traditions, beliefs, customs, all that stuff is prioritized over God's clear command.
Ah, tradition.
Yeah. When divine guidance is presented, the common response is, nope, I will do what my ancestors did. This effectively makes ancestors one's gods. The Quran warns against this repeatedly.
Right.
And historically, this was apparently the main reason people rejected prophets. The prophets offered better guidance, but people just clung to tradition.
This is how we've always done it.
Exactly that mentality. The choice, Maududi emphasizes, is stark. Either follow your forefathers or follow my command. You cannot do both. You have to choose.
Okay, self-ancestors. What's the third path?
The third path is obeying others besides Allah. This means obeying people, maybe out of fear or for power, wealth, influence, maybe just cultural admiration, instead of obeying God.
So following the crowd or powerful figures?
Yeah, or just anyone whose command contradicts God's. If someone follows another's word over God's, the source says they shut the door to guidance.
Wow.
The core idea here is that true guidance is only possible with one Lord. If you're trying to follow multiple gods, yourself, your ancestors, society, influential people, it just creates chaos. You can't find that clear, straight path.
So those are Maududi's 3 false gods.
Yeah.
The self, family, and tribal customs, and, well, the world's influence, wealth, rulers, even misguided nations.
Exactly. And he stresses that anyone who truly wants to become a Muslim must first smash these 3 idols, because without that, true servitude to God is simply impossible.
And the sources really bring this concept home with some quite vivid real-world examples. They show the practical, often devastating consequences of following these 3 false gods.
Like what?
Well, take the state of Punjabi Muslims at the time he was writing. Despite being, I think it says, a 15 million strong majority, Maududi notes they held no influence. Why? Because this worship of self, customs, and other people had completely hollowed out their strength.
Hollowed out, this is a strong phrase.
It is. And you see this played out clearly in issues like persistent caste discrimination. Islam came to unite, right? To create one brotherhood. But Maududi highlights how Punjabi Muslims clung to these pre-Islamic Hindu divisions, Rajputs, Ghakkars, Mughals, Jats. They refused to intermarry or unite purely because of ancestral custom.
Following the forefathers, idol number 2.
Exactly. And the divine response, as the source puts it rather starkly, is, then stay divided, cling to Hindu customs, and we will humiliate you despite your number.
Wow, it's direct.
It's a powerful illustration of how these cultural patterns can totally undermine core religious principles. Another stark example given is the denial of inheritance to women. God commanded inheritance for daughters in the Quran. But the response is often, well, our forefathers didn't do this, so we won't.
So that hits all 3 idols, doesn't it?
It does. The self's preference, ancestral customs, and even following the practices of other nations, all while claiming to be Muslim. So, okay, if these are the pitfalls, the false gods, what then is the true definition of a Muslim according to Maududi?
Right, so a true Muslim, according to him, is someone who is free from these 3 diseases: slavery to desires, blind adherence to tradition, and obeying others besides God.
Free from those.
They are, quite simply, a servant to no one but God and a follower of no one but the messenger. That's the core. They possess this firm conviction that God's and his messenger's teachings are the absolute truth. They believe all the good of this world and the hereafter lies only in those teachings.
So this means, though, in every single matter of life, their approach is basically straightforward. What do Allah and his messenger command? And once they know that command, they submit completely. Regardless of personal feelings, family objections, worldly opposition, whatever, their reply, without hesitation, is, I'm the servant of Allah, not yours. I have believed in the messenger, not in you. It's a very clear line drawn in the sand.
It is. And the sources also point to clear signs of, well, hypocrisy. If someone claims to know God's command but then disagrees with it, maybe thinks it's harmful somehow, and follows their own opinion instead, this indicates a heart that's empty of faith.
Okay.
Similarly, prioritizing generations-old customs over God's and the messenger's commands, even if that person seems outwardly very religious, that's a sign that true religion hasn't really sunk into the heart. True religion isn't just rituals or appearance, it's submission, it's obedience.
That reminds me of that powerful statement from the Quran, right? The one that says, those who turn away when they're called to God and his messenger for judgment. Well, they aren't really believers. It questions if there is a disease in their hearts.
Exactly. Whereas true believers, their response is simple. We hear and we obey. Full stop.
We hear and we obey. Simple but profound.
And to really grasp the power of this kind of obedience, the sources offer some incredibly powerful historical anecdotes, stories that illustrate what genuine faith and submission actually look like in action.
Oh, like what? Give us an example.
Okay, well, take the story of the abandonment of alcohol among the Arabs. Apparently, it was a deeply ingrained habit, addiction even.
Right, I've heard about this.
But the moment the Quranic prohibition was revealed, people instantly smashed their wine vessels. The streets of Medina actually ran with wine, like rainwater after a storm.
Wow, literally ran with wine.
Literally. People who were in the middle of drinking just froze, pulled the cups away from their lips without taking another drop. This, Maududi emphasizes, this is the spirit of faith.
That image, wine running in the streets, or the other one you mentioned earlier, someone confessing a sin when nobody saw them, it really drives home how profound that level of submission was. It's almost unimaginable today, isn't it?
It really is. Another one is the man who committed adultery, no witnesses. But he comes to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, 3 times to confess and ask for the prescribed punishment. He was willing to face 100 lashes, even stoning.
Why?
Because, as the source puts it, he was unwilling to appear before God as a defiant sinner. The fear of God outweighed the fear of worldly punishments.
That's intense.
And maybe even more striking, the severing of family ties for God's sake. In battles like Badr and Uhud, you had fathers fighting sons, brothers fighting brothers. They sacrificed their dearest family members for the sake of God and his messenger, not for personal gain or tribal loyalty. It was pure devotion.
They also, they abandoned ancient customs, didn't they? Things practiced for centuries.
Absolutely. Arabs shatter idols they worship forever. They gave up common vices, drinking, adultery, gambling, theft. They accepted difficult changes like women's modesty rules, inheritance rights for women, changing laws about adopted sons.
Things that must have been hugely countercultural.
Hugely. They erased family customs that were centuries old and trampled underfoot at God's command things they once held sacred. And apparently they did it joyfully, embracing even the hard obligations. That's what real transformative faith looks like, according to these texts.
And this whole essence, it seems to be captured in that Quranic verse. You shall never attain righteousness until you spend in the way of Allah from that which you love.
Precisely. Life is constantly presenting this choice, isn't it? God's command pulls you one way, your desires pull you another. One path leads to God's pleasure, the other leads to maybe worldly approval or comfort.
Right.
Choosing God's command is Islam. Abandoning it for desires or worldly gains is, as Maududi puts it quite bluntly, disbelief or hypocrisy.
Yet the sources offer a pretty stark critique of what they call today's Muslim, or, well, the Muslim of Maududi's time, perhaps applicable today too.
What's the critique?
That many accept Islam's easy parts but then turn away when truly tested. They might praise Islam loudly, perform superficial acts, maybe look the part, but they resist applying its actual laws to themselves, their families, their businesses.
So Islam becomes what?
It becomes, as the source says, a beautiful showpiece rather than a living, breathing law that guides everything. And this superficiality makes religious acts lack effect because the soul is absent. The outward form is there, but the inner submission isn't.
And the true criterion of Islam, Maududi explains, is found right there in the Quran. Indeed, my prayer, my worship, my living and my dying are all for Allah, the Lord of all the world.
All-encompassing.
Totally. And the Prophet himself clarified this, saying, whoever loves for the sake of Allah, hates for the sake of Allah, gives for the sake of Allah, and withholds for the sake of Allah, has perfected his faith. It means complete dedication. Your entire being, your emotions, your dealings, everything done purely for Allah.
This level of commitment, it brings us to a really common misunderstanding that Maududi highlights, something quite important. The difference between what he calls legal or fiqhi Islam and true Islam.
Ah, yes. That's a critical distinction. Could you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So for worldly affairs, legal Islam is based on basically a verbal declaration of faith and outward actions. If someone says they believe, fulfills the basic conditions like prayer, they are legally considered Muslim for social dealings, marriage, inheritance, community rights, that sort of thing.
Okay, so that's the external legal side.
Exactly. But for the hereafter, for salvation, that depends on the sincerity of the heart. It's about whether you have truly submitted your entire self to Allah. Allah judges based on what's actually in the heart. Was your life and death, their loyalty, their obedience, their devotion, all truly for Allah? That's God's ultimate standard for faith.
So this naturally creates two distinct types, or many categories, of Muslims described in the text.
Right. The first are what Maududi calls partial Muslims. These are people who accept Islam as like one aspect of their life, maybe a very important aspect, but still just one part. So while they might show devotion in that limited domain prayers, remembering God, certain etiquettes, the rest of their lives, their love and hate, their business dealings, family life, national loyalties, all that remains disconnected. It's governed by personal interest or worldly motives, not by Islam.
And what's the consequence of that, according to Maududi?
Well, according to him, such Muslims have made no meaningful contribution to Islamic history. He even suggests this partial commitment is why leadership sometimes falls into the hands of non-believers.
Wow, that's a strong claim.
Yeah.
So what's the alternative? The other type?
The complete Muslims. These are the ones who surrender their entire beings to Islam. Their Muslim identity isn't compartmentalized. It permeates all aspects of their life, as a parent, a spouse, a worker, a citizen, everything.
So their emotions, desires, judgments, how they interact in society, it's all built on Islamic principles.
Exactly. They live, they fight, they give, they withhold all for Allah alone. These, Maududi argues, are the real Muslims, the kind Allah wants, the ones who make a true Islamic contribution to the world.
It makes sense that true devotion brings results, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no ideology, even a false one, really succeeds without its followers being fully committed and willing to sacrifice.
True. And Islam's demand for complete devotion, the source argues, is a rightful demand because fundamentally everything belongs to Allah. Your life, your body, your possessions. So sacrificing for Allah isn't really giving something up that was yours to begin with. It's simply fulfilling your inherent duty as a servant.
And importantly, Maududi emphasizes that these criteria we've been discussing is your life and death for Allah. Your talents and time used for His will. Your obedience only to Him.
Yeah.
Your love and hate for His sake. Giving and withholding for Him. All these are meant as a scale for you to judge yourself.
Not for judging others.
Right. They are explicitly not for labeling other people as hypocrites or disbelievers. The focus is entirely on self-correction, on checking yourself before you face Allah's judgment.
That's a really crucial distinction, isn't it? Focus on yourself. But, okay, stepping back a bit. Why this insistence on obedience? Obedience to Allah and His messenger. Is Allah, in need of our obedience? Does He seek power or control like some worldly rulers might?
No, absolutely not. The sources are clear. Allah is free from all needs. He doesn't require anything from us at all. His command for obedience is purely 100% for our own benefit.
Our benefit? How so?
Well, think of it like this. If you truly believe a doctor has the cure for your illness, you don't just sort of believe it vaguely. You take the medicine, right? You follow the instructions. You don't argue about the dosage or the timing if you trust the doctor knows best.
Okay, I get that analogy.
That's the kind of complete trust and obedience Maududi is describing towards the divine guidance. Allah desires humanity to live not in ignorance or as slaves to Satan or their own desires or other humans, but as noble vicegerents on earth in the light of divine guidance.
Noble vicegerents.
And only Allah, the all-knowing, the all-wise, is completely free from any self-interest and truly knows what benefits us or harms us. So His guidance is described as pure, just, and beneficial.
Okay, so if obedience is for our benefit, how do we actually get that benefit from the guidance? What's required?
The sources say two key things are needed. First, sincere faith. A real conviction that Allah and His messenger's guidance is true and good, even if you don't fully grasp the wisdom behind every single rule right away.
Okay, sincere faith. And second?
Obedience. Because belief without action is, well, meaningless, isn't it? Knowing poison is deadly, but drinking it anyway still leads to death. The belief didn't help if it didn't lead to action. That's why the Quran commands again and again. Obey Allah and obey the messenger.
Obey Allah and obey the messenger. Okay, but what does that mean in practical terms, day to day? Does it mean we just ignore all human guidance, like scholars or leaders?
No, not at all. It doesn't mean ignoring all human guidance. What it does mean is not blindly following anyone. You must, as the source says, always verify whether what they command aligns with Allah and his messenger.
Verify first.
Yes. If it aligns, then you obey, because you're actually obeying Allah through them. If it contradicts God's guidance, you reject it, no matter who it is. Commanding could be a ruler, a scholar, a family member, anyone.
So since direct divine communication isn't happening anymore.
Right, exactly. Since that ceased, human scholars interpret and convey the guidance. Therefore, Maududi argues, you must follow only those who lead you according to the Quran and Sunnah. You look for leaders who are themselves bound by the divine sources.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, there's a really important point the sources highlight next about a common misunderstanding between two key Islamic terms, deen and sharia.
Ah, yes. Religion and law. People often confuse these, right?
They do. The sources dive deep into the meanings of deen first. It can mean things like honor, authority, sovereignty, rule, but also the flip side, submission, obedience, servitude. And crucially, it also encompasses judgment, accountability, reward, and punishment.
So quite a rich term.
Very rich. The Quran states, indeed, the only deen acceptable to Allah is Islam. Maududi explains this means recognizing Allah alone as the ultimate master, sovereign, and judge. It's about singular worship, singular obedience, and fearing his final judgment.
So in essence, deen is about recognizing Allah as the owner and ruler, obeying and worshiping him alone, fearing his judgment, seeking his reward.
Exactly. And accepting the prophet as the messenger and obeying the revealed scripture that's also part of the deen, because that's how Allah's commands reach us.
Okay, got it. So if that's deen, the core relationship and recognition,
yeah.
What then is sharia?
Sharia literally means the path or the way. Once you've accepted the deen, the core submission to Allah, then the sharia is the method by which you live out that submission. It's the practical details. How to pray, how to purify yourself, how to deal with others, how to conduct your life according to God's guidance.
So deen is the what and why, and sharia is the how.
That's a good way to put it. And here's the absolutely key difference Maududi highlights. Deen has always been one and the same. Across all prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, peace be upon them all, the core message of submitting to the one God was the same.
The deen was consistent.
Yes, but sharia has changed over time. Different prophets brought different specific laws and rituals, maybe different forms of prayer, different purity rules, marriage laws, dietary laws, etc. Their followers were all considered Muslims because their deen was the same, submission to God.
Okay, so different paths, but the same destination or core belief.
Exactly. But now, after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Maududi argues only his sharia, his method, is valid and accepted by God. To refuse his specific how now means you're actually rejecting the command of the master, which affects the deen itself.
I see. And this understanding is critical when we look at differences within the Muslim community today, right? Like between different schools of law, the madhabs.
Absolutely critical. All those who accept Prophet Muhammad's sharia as divine and obligatory are Muslims, even if they interpret a specific command differently. For example, how you position your hands in prayer, or whether you say Ameen loudly or quietly after Surah Al-Fatiha.
These are differences in interpreting the sharia, the how.
Precisely. They are not differences in the fundamental deen. Therefore, Maududi stresses, no one has the right to declare someone else outside the fold of Islam over such interpretive differences. To do so is like assuming the position of God himself.
And there's a strong warning from the Prophet about that, isn't there? About wrongly calling another Muslim a disbeliever.
A very strong warning. If someone falsely calls a Muslim a disbeliever, the accusation rebounds on the accuser. This act, takfir, declaring someone an infidel, is incredibly serious.
But the tragedy Maududi points out is that so many people fail to grasp this crucial distinction between deen and sharia.
Yeah, and what happens then?
They tragically turn these sharia differences, these differences in interpretation or practice, into deen differences, fundamental differences of faith.
And that leads to, well, exactly what we often see.
Exactly. It leads to sects, dividing mosques, insulting one another, filing lawsuits, and splitting the ummah, the global Muslim community. It escalates to calling each other disbelievers, takfir, over things like minor differences between, say, Hanafis, Shafi'is, or Ali Hadith schools of thought.
And this division, Maududi argues quite forcefully, has caused unimaginable harm to Muslims globally.
Unimaginable harm.
Yeah. They are supposed to be one ummah, one community in name, but in practice, they're fragmented into dozens of groups. He uses the example again from his time of 80 million Indian Muslims. United, he says, they could stand against any power. But sectarianism has completely torn them apart.
So their hearts are divided, they can't stand together even when facing a crisis.
That's exactly his point. He even notes, sadly, that some Muslims come to despise fellow Muslims of other sects more than they despise non-Muslims, sometimes even supporting non-Muslims against other Muslims just to, quote, humiliate a different sect.
That's a really bleak picture of internal division.
It is, and he points out that this internal division is actually identified as a form of divine punishment in the Quran itself, Allah warns. Or do you expect that he will divide you into factions and make you taste the violence of one another?
So this infighting, this sectarian violence, it's seen as a consequence, a punishment for straying.
That's how Maududi interprets it, yes. He saw this internal strife, particularly fierce in some regions like Punjab at the time, as evidence of this divine warning playing out, leading to total ineffectiveness despite having large numbers. It's a universal lesson, really, about the dangers of disunity.
So after painting this picture of division and its causes, what's the final appeal? What's the call to action?
The call is urgent and clear: to break these factions, to live as brothers, and to become one ummah again. These divisions, he insists, are born of ignorance, specifically ignorance of the difference between Deen and Sharia. Allah made only one ummah, the Ummah Muslima. It's a profound call for unity, grounded in understanding the fundamental principles versus the secondary interpretations.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot we've covered. Let's try to bring it together for you, our listener. We've journeyed through some really profound depths today, haven't we? Looking at what it truly means to submit, according to Maududi.
Yeah, what real submission is, what misguidance looks like, those three false gods, and how genuine faith actually translates into action, into those historical examples of incredible obedience.
And we've also dug into that critical distinction between the foundational religion, the Deen, and its varying interpretations or methods, the Sharia, and crucially, the devastating consequences that come from blurring those lines and dividing over secondary issues.
And this isn't just, some abstract historical or theological insight. It feels like a blueprint almost for understanding both individual strength and collective strength. It highlights the power of unity and also the subtle ways our own desires or our traditions can easily steer us off course if we're not careful.
It really challenges us to look beyond just the surface level of religious practice.
Definitely. So as you reflect on this deep dive, here's maybe a provocative thought to leave you with. What might the world look like? What might the Muslim world look like? Or even humanity more broadly, if instead of fragmenting over interpretive differences over the how, people focus their collective energy on embodying those fundamental principles of genuine submission to a singular divine will, the why?
And maybe on a personal level too. What divisions in your own life, whether personal or communal, might actually stem from prioritizing the how over the why, or maybe prioritizing tradition or self-interest over a core principle.
Yeah. This deep dive is really an invitation, isn't it? An invitation to self-reflect and consider how these timeless principles, as laid out by Maududi here, might apply to your own understanding, your own actions, your own life.